and a person who's made a lot of contributions in the area of film and in the area of producing material that is just, I would say, nothing short of dazzling, is Alex Winter. Alex Winter is a person who's going to be joining us next, and he is a person that, well, he put together a film, Lynn, that you know about. Tell us a little bit about Deep Web, which Alex Winter has done for us.
I would say that Alex is one of the rare filmmakers that really has a lot of integrity and believes in presenting the story in an accurate way, but not answering questions, but more asking questions so that the people watching can make their own decisions about it. The film's excellent. I feel like it's not an advocacy piece for Ross, but I think it's fair to what happened. And he's just extremely talented, and it's very entertaining besides.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So he's standing by right now, and we're welcoming aboard here to the free Ross-A-Thon, Alex Winter. Thank you very much for being with us, Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, you guys. How are you?
We're glad to have you here. So
Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the film Deep Web from your point of view. I watched it just a little while ago and really impressed that you were very fair. I think you didn't take a side either way. Tell us a little bit about what you were trying to accomplish in putting that together.
Well, you know, I make movies. I don't really, you know, I'm not a journalist, so I was interested in telling a story that expressed the experience as I saw it, and then looking at it from a couple of different perspectives. This extremely tense and catastrophic experience that everyone was going through, basically starting with Ross's arrest in San Francisco and ending with the sentencing. That was basically the book ending that I'd set out for myself, was sort of starting with his arrest and ending with whatever the immediate outcome of his trial, even if it's a first trial, was going to be. So, you know, my interest was looking at it from several perspectives of the participants. Journalist Andy Greenberg and some of the other technological journalists that were dealing with the case, and then from inside the family's perspective, from Lynn and Kirk, as they tried to wind their way through this horrible experience they were going through and reach some kind of understanding about what had happened with their son. It's really, in a way, that presents the situation in what I would consider a fair way, simply because it's not an agenda-oriented piece. It's really about just trying to convey the experiences.
Yes, exactly. One thing I want to go into more in depth that Lynn and I were talking about, I thought you had some brilliant insights, Alex. When you said that it's not about one person doing this. You've got one person controlling it all. You've got a number of different people that are out there. This is the way the web is working today. And you used a very interesting analogy of Jeff Bezos running Amazon from a coffee shop or something. Tell us a little bit about what you thought about that. I think you've got some good insights on that.
Well, I've been doing work around emerging technologies for going on 30 years. So I'm pretty intimate with the growth of the internet. And I'd made a film before this about Napster and its rise and fall. And a very similar thing, even though the stakes are considerably higher here, and no one was facing life imprisonment with Napster. There were a lot of similarities in the two cases. They were both innovative technologies. They were technologies that were ahead of their time. They were systems they were communities for people. Primarily, the Silk Road was primarily a community, as was Napster. They were both very threatening to various power structures. Napster less so to the government, but to some degree to the government as well. Mostly to different industries that felt threatened by the evolution of these technologies. So I knew that when I saw the Silk Road thing happen and with Ross, I knew that there was going to be a very overt pushback against him and against anybody who was involved in the Silk Road. But I also saw a lot of the same mistakes being made from the outside, from the press, from the government, and from the adversaries of the Silk Road, as I did with Napster, where with Napster they were always putting all the blame on Sean Fanning, the kid with the baseball cap. And you know, if you went to the Napster offices in 2001, there were 1,000 people working there, literally 1,000. If you turn on the TV, it was this kid in a baseball cap. It was the implication was that this kid in his basement, you know, this hoodie wearing hacker kid was upending the world from his laptop, which is not how technological systems work. So I knew before I even started working on the story that I had to reach out to a number of people. I didn't know Ross at the time, and I wasn't even trying to pursue him. He was already incarcerated. And I made contact with probably 30 to 40 of the core architects of the Silk Road, and winnowed that down to about 6 to 10 that I felt really had been instrumental in putting it together. And those were my sources. So you know, I think that has dogged this case from the very beginning. But I think in what's more I think worrisome is that in the situation of the Silk Road, there was an agenda to keep Ross identified as a lone individual in charge of all of this. So that made it, I think, harder, and that made the sentencing a lot more extreme, and I would say sort of unarguably unjust.
Yeah, exactly. We see that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they tried to paint a picture of one person operating it all, which really doesn't square with reality as we see it today?
There are two reasons. One is innocent, and one is not. And I think the innocent one is that there's a grotesque lack of understanding of technology by the DOJ, by you know, various government entities, by certain business institutions that are in power. They just don't understand how these technologies work. Genuinely, they really, I mean, this is sort of Mr. Robot effect. They genuinely believe that hackers are these sociopathological, hoodie-wearing miscreants that, you know, live in their mom's basement, which is just has never been the case, even back in the 60s when hackers got started. So that's the sort of less worrisome side, because that's evolving and people are learning, and younger people are coming up through the DOJ who do know how these systems work, and that will slowly change. And the FBI has been very vocal that it's been hard for them to find people to work within the FBI that are very technologically adept. The more worrisome reason is that, you know, they wanted to bag a trophy. You know, certain people within the government made that very clear about Ross from the very beginning, that they had found this guy in San Francisco. He was the reason for all these horrible things happening on the internet. He was the reason that there was this terrible, evil thing called the Darknet that was filled with terrible people. We had to hang this guy from the highest tree. And that was, sadly, why I knew the case was going to go down the way that it did. Was I knew that in 2013, because it was evident that the government was adamant that they pile as much of their animus and their fear on this individual. And then, of course, there's a cost, which is even more grotesque and Kafkaesque, because there's a cost component. Because the federal government doesn't usually bring something to trial unless they're 100% sure they can win, and win swiftly and simply. So why would they start going after all of the people who were really behind the Silk Road, who were scattered all over the place? They were in Thailand, they were in Ireland, they were in Australia, they were in Germany, they were in Spain, they were all over the place. And the government knows this because they've actually gone after a number of those people on much lesser charges. It benefited them to put as much of the onus of this on one person that they could swiftly and frankly as cheaply as possible, sad to say because someone's life is in the balance, run through the system and sock away for as long as humanly possible, tag as much of a sentence on them as they can, so that it hopefully acts as a deterrent. And you know, it's tragic for a number of reasons. I would argue, I have a hard time looking at the upside of any of this, so I apologize if, following Jeffrey Tucker, who I love and admire, I'm not the optimist in the room. I didn't like sitting in a courtroom and watching someone get sentenced to double life sentences without possibility of parole. It's one of the most depressing things I've ever witnessed in my life. You know, there's a person behind all this who's in jail ostensibly for the rest of their life, and that is a tragedy, and it's wrong, and the sentence is wrong. And there really does need to be activity around this and awareness around this. And on top of that, you know, the government is expanding ever greatly the powers to prosecute and to criminalize in all of these different areas. So people are losing their rights day by day by day. We lost a ton of them under Obama. I can't imagine that Trump is going to be is going to be helpful in this regard. So, you know, these are really serious issues, and they really do need to be addressed. So I think that Ross, you know, sadly found himself at the intersection of a number of areas that are over-prosecuted, cybercrime, people don't understand it, cryptocurrency, financial regulators are terrified of it. Look what just happened with the IRS and Coinbase, you know, and the drug war. And
yes. Alex, I think you're right, that it's an intersection of all of these coming together. Lynn, you and I were talking about that.
Yeah.
And is that what you see as well?
Well, yeah, and it was Alex that really helped me see that. And you had also mentioned once, Alex, that the site itself was essentially political and philosophical, not so much about drugs or a particular thing, but really a community who had ideals and a philosophy.
well,
right?
internet communities usually grow up around sympathetic ideas, even if they're not completely integrated. Meaning, Napster, which was always viewed as a music service, was really the first single online community, you know, of active users who were on one server at one time in the world. And if you were on Napster in those days, you loved Napster because you could find people who had similar interests to you in all these different areas, not just music. And that's why I used Napster at that time. I was too old to worry about getting more music. I had more music than I knew what to do with. And Silk Road was very similar. There had to be something that brought the community together. And this idea of an online marketplace where you could literally access anything made a lot of noise and brought a lot of people together. And if you were on the forums, which I was, the forums were talking about art, politics, philosophy, music, you name it. And they were very robust. And the people that were most, you know, saddened from that community when it went down were mostly saddened because they'd lost that community. They'd lost that thread, and they started to rebuild them in different ways. It doesn't go for every darknet market, but again, darknet markets are a tiny fraction of the darknet and a minuscule fraction of any kind of trade, period. So I wouldn't say anything to be particularly worried about on a major level. But the loss of community, I think, was significant.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's an important point. It's the community, and really that's what the internet's all about. Is Alex, you've made some significant major contributions with your work. We appreciate what you've done with Deep Web. Tell us if somebody says, hey, I want to get in touch with Alex, I want to find out more about Deep Web. How do they do that?
I think if someone's curious about anything, they should go to freeross.org and donate.
Hey, Alex.
Yes.
We have a link to Deep Web.
Yeah, and you can find me there.
Thanks, Alex.
Very good. Well, Alex, thank you very much for joining us. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Alex.
that.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.